Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of The Suited Shootist. This one's going to be a little bit more of a serious conversation. I'm going to try and keep it fairly brief, but I'm going to just right out the gate say as a disclaimer, yes, there have been some recent social media interactions that were part of a kind of the contributing factor to this video, but no, I'm not taking shots at anybody in particular. If I've got a beef with somebody, I will let them know one-on-one. I just recognize that there can be a lot of both actual and perceived drama and friction within the digital gun space, and I do my best not to contribute to it. So, given that one of the things that I talk about are the social considerations of an armed lifestyle, this was one of those shower thoughts that just kind of struck me, and it's not something that a lot of people talk about enough. Because number one, it can very easily get misconstrued, and number two, it can require a lot of vulnerability to talk about. And what is it? Well, people come to the gun space for a lot of different reasons. And, those reasons are their own, and it's not really up to me or anybody else to question their motivations. I will say this, in the time that I've been here, I've experienced it myself, I've seen it in other people, where it's not uncommon to see folks use their hobby of shooting, whether that be defensive-oriented, competition-oriented, whatever, as an unhealthy coping mechanism for other shortcomings in their life. Very early on, I was one of those people where I wouldn't go anywhere that I couldn't take my gun. And I found out years after the fact that my girlfriend at the time, now wife, hated that. Like, it was a major pain point in the relationship. Even once I got past that, if I was feeling insecure or if things just weren't going my way, in life in general, I could go online and I could basically, dunk on somebody, flex what little knowledge I had, and go, well, at least I'm smarter than that idiot. And thankfully, I have, for the most part, gotten past that. And because number one, it's not productive. It does nothing to grow the space. But I've seen a lot of folks use different facets of this, either as a sense of validation or a sense of identity, in some very unhealthy and problematic ways. The gear side is kind of the most obvious. You'll have people who are, whether it's, if I've got this mag well, or this mag extension, or this MOA dot, or this whatever bolt-on bullshit, then I'll prevail in a gunfight, because they want that guarantee. Because the idea of not winning, the concept that you could lose and not end up going home, scares them. And it scares me too. It's a terrifying fucking concept. But there are no guarantees. And you find folks that are chasing these fractional improvements because, oh, well, you never know. To the point where they're basically like creating a no shit open gun that they're trying to carry, and it's like, bro, you're not doing high risk warrants in Atlanta or Detroit. You're an IT director. You live in the suburbs. So, from a risk profile standpoint, again, if somebody is reasonably able to accommodate something like that into their lifestyle without dramatic adjustments, okay, cool, fine, whatever. But that is the stage at which the carry gun really starts deviating away from emergency rescue gear and into security blanket. So that's kind of where it starts becoming problematic. On the skill side, it's even more complicated, because you've got the folks who, they feel like, well, if I've got the sub-second draw, or if I've got the the .16 splits or whatever, again, they feel like that's what's going to set them up for success, and it can. But again, there's no guarantee. And the problem with both of those is the people that have these aspirational goals will tend to speak in such broad blanket statements that it comes across like that is the minimum expected standard, which discourages and suppresses participation from anybody at the entry levels. So there's that piece of it. The other aspect is where things start getting really kind of icky and sensitive. And this is the part that has to be handled very delicately. There's a lot of folks where their version of their defensive encounter, particularly the outcome, that's how they envision themselves. You know, that's their avatar. That is how they feel like that their identity or their purpose. And, you know, I am a middle-aged suburban yuppie. My purpose in life is not to win a gunfight. It isn't. Now, there are circumstances that I very well may be unfortunately pressed into where I should damn well be able to, but that's not my purpose in life. And that's where some of this I see as really problematic, whether it's someone whose life is just so unfulfilling or unsatisfying that this is what they glob onto, is that idea of the, you know, kind of being able to save the day, being the hero, is where they draw that from. Or, you know, potentially for the folks that have, you know, in a previous career sworn an oath and worn a uniform, they no longer have that sense of purpose and identity. And now that they're in the private sector, that absence is that void is creating problems. You know, there's a lot of folks that seem to have a lot of themselves wrapped up in how good of a gunfighter they are. And if your day job involves body armor and wearing a gun, I can understand that, because it's a very real risk of, you know, it's a job hazard. That's not the same kind of job hazard as it is for the most of us. And where I see this represented the most recently is in like church security. The people that I've seen talk about trying to either participate or stand up church security groups really strike me as like the last people that I'd ever want piping off rounds in a crowded public area. You know, and the frustrating part is that they're ostensibly well-intentioned, but they're only focused on the gunfight. You know, you ask them about like medical response or communications plans or any of this other stuff, and they'd rather try and mince details over, well, what MOA dot should everybody be carrying? Which is utterly fucking irrelevant. And the really sort of insidious part of that is, if somebody is willing to stand up and put themselves and their life on the line between evil and other people, it needs to be for the benefit of the other people, not the person standing in the middle. You know, Craig Douglas has talked about, you've got the people that want to do something versus the people that want to be someone. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of folks, content creators, influencers, people that claim to be instructors. And I say claim to be because the real ones really do view it as a calling and as an obligation. And they're there to serve their students. They're not there for cachet and clout. But, you know, again, like I was watching one of Ben Steger's videos on YouTube, and there was a guy in his comment section who was lamenting the fact that on his church security team, they demanded all A-zone hits on the USPSA target as part of their qualification. And he's like, well, but I'm able to get C-zones way faster. And he wasn't able to justify in his mind the severity and the need for that high level of accountability. And it's like, if that's the case, dude, you don't have any business being on a church security team. again, a bit of an aside, but again, that's one of these things where it's real easy for people to get deep in the weeds and get overly fixated on something that they have a lot of control over, but that isn't necessarily meaningful. And like I said, I don't expect this to be a particularly popular video. It's probably going to get at least some hate, but I think this is something that we should be talking about, because we need to make sure, to pull a line from Melody Lauer, it's like, don't get so hung up on training for self-defense that you don't actually live a life that's worth defending. And so, again, nobody is ever at 100% at every aspect of their life. There's always a room for improvement somewhere. Just, again, make sure that you don't lose sight of what's actually important. Because just because you're a good shooter doesn't mean you're a good person. And what you're able to accomplish with a firearm doesn't define your value or your worth. And that's just, there's a lot of folks that seem to have large segments of their self-identity wrapped up in this. And so just kind of keep an eye out for you and yours, because a sub-second draw is not going to make you a better spouse. The Gucci gear is not going to, improve the quality of your friendships. Your ability to either plan a stage or, pie a room ain't going to keep you from having a heart attack. So some of it's easy to get wrapped up in. And like I said, I've got caught up in it myself on more than one occasion. But just take a good hard look and maintain perspective. Because I think it was Chris Seipert on one of his podcast interviews, had just talked about it's very easy if you get ultra deep into the waters of defense craft to get this very cold and cynical attitude of the world at large. And yeah, the world has the capacity for brutality and all the ugliness, but there's some pretty awesome shit out there too. So just don't lose sight of that. I know this is probably a little deeper than most people wanted, but I felt like it was worth saying. So hope everybody has a fantastic week. Stay dangerous and stay sharp.